In our previous episode, after returning from the abyss, Lin rested for several days. However, the killing intent clinging to him showed no signs of fading. Afterwards, White Divine decided to take him to meet someone who might be able to help. Yet, let's just say he isn't the friendliest type. The man not only attacked them on the spot, he also caused our boy's killing intent to surge instantly. As we continued where we left off, Lin unleashed Slow Curse and Soul Flame together. Massive red shackles shot through the air, aiming straight for the man. However, the man only chuckled with a trace of disdain. With a simple wave of his hand, the shackles shattered in midair. But then a spark of green flame descended suddenly from above. The man had clearly underestimated it because when the flames landed, his body trembled, and he let out a muffled grunt, forcing him to the ground. Before he could recover, he found himself surrounded by a thick, toxic mist. Surprise flickered in his eyes. Yet this was far from over. The skeletal mages behind our boy had already finished casting, and a barrage of attacks from 4 different elements poured down like a deadly storm. The man, however, showed no panic. His hand gripped his weapon tightly as a grin formed on his face. He muttered with amusement that the boy was quite interesting. With a gentle swing of his blade, he effortlessly dispersed the incoming attack. Lin prepared to strike again, but a firm hand landed on his shoulder. The deep voice of White Divine reached his ears, and at that moment, a portion of the killing intent in his eyes faded. Taking a deep breath, Lin glanced at his teacher, who offered him a small smile and told him to recall his skeletons. The skellies dissolved back into Lin's summoning space. White Divine then turned to the man, saying, "Enough is enough, so let's get to business." The man flew toward them, easily dispersing the lingering toxic mist in the process. Upon landing, his eyes landed on Lin, asking White Divine if this was his student. White Divine's face lit up with pride as he confirmed, saying not bad at all, wasn't he? The man responded with a cold sneer, scoffing that a mere level 39 brat had dared to challenge a divine-level professional. Clearly, the boy had no idea what death meant. White Divine waved off the remark, reminding him that he knew exactly what caused that to happen. Without further delay, White Divine introduced the man to our boy, saying his name was Yan Kuangsheng, a level 95 divine warrior. Recognition flashed in Lin's eyes. He had read about this man in several books, a legend on the same level as his teacher. The guy's most renowned feat was facing 3 demon lords alone, where he ended up killing one and severely wounding the other 2 before going missing. Lin immediately offered a respectful bow, which was met with only a huff from the man. Without wasting time, he turned to White Divine, questioning his reason for bringing his disciple here. White Divine tells him the kid had slaughtered too many demons and was now consumed by killing intent. He had brought him here, hoping for some help. Jan's face darkened as realization struck. He knew White Divine was here for his treasure. With a sudden scowl, he declared that White Divine was dreaming if he thought he'd part with it. Yet White Divine remained calm, saying it was just an object useless to him anyway. Besides, wasn't it the duty of them old folks to lend a hand when a promising youth was in trouble? The man scoffed, making it clear that helping someone else's disciple might be possible. But since this was White Divine's disciple, there was nothing to discuss. By now, the guy is starting to piss him off, but White Divine kept his composure. He began explaining that Lin wasn't just a disciple of his, he was the finest talent of his generation. He wondered aloud if the man wasn't at all curious about how someone so young could carry such a terrifying killing aura. The man seemed unimpressed and turned to leave, brushing off the matter as none of his concern. Yet despite his dismissive words, deep down he still wonders how could a mere level 39 kid possess killing intent far beyond what his power should allow. Without waiting for a response, White Divine continued speaking just loud enough for the guy to hear. When he revealed that Lin had ventured into the abyss alone, the man's steps slowed slightly. But it was what came next that truly stopped him in his tracks was the fact he heard Lin had massacred 3 entire demon cities. The man froze. Then comes the real shocker. White Divine added one final detail, saying Lin had also slain a demon lord's clone. The man's eyes widened in disbelief. He snapped toward Lin, demanding confirmation. Lin gave a slight nod and calmly explained how he had eliminated the clone and then unleashed Venomous Ring on the demon lord's city before the real demon lord arrived, which caused the man's thought racing. Recalling the toxic mist from their earlier skirmish, he realized it must have been the same skill. Remembering the power of the skill, He reasoned that even a level 60 demon would struggle against it, so the boy wasn't lying. A long silence followed as he stared at Lin. At this point, he knew this kid wasn't a mere prodigy, this was something monstrous. He compared Lin to himself at that age and concluded there was no contest. What this boy had achieved at level 39 was something neither he nor White Divine had ever accomplished. White Divine, catching the subtle change in his expression, couldn't help but press the matter further. Surely now, the man could admit that Lin was worthy of what he guarded. The man finally agreed, but not without naming his price. He would only part on one condition. White Divine's response was immediate and confident, insisting that even 10 conditions would be acceptable. The man's demand was simple, yet unexpected, saying he wanted Lin to be his disciple. Without a moment's hesitation, White Divine accepted, leaving both Lin and the man equally stunned. Neither had expected him to agree so easily, and the man even questioned if White Divine had truly understood what he was agreeing to. Lin, too, wanted to say something, but White Divine brushed aside his concerns, stating with ease that having 2 teachers was nothing unusual for a prodigy. With a knowing smirk, White Divine clasped the man's shoulder, sealing the agreement. He reminded the man that people like them should always keep his word. The man, realizing how smoothly he had been cornered, almost like this was planned all along. Annoyed, he retaliated with a punch, clearly urging White Divine to get lost. White Divine blocked the blow effortlessly and with a hearty laugh, tells Yan to take good care of Lin before taking his leave. Without further delay, the man motioned for Lin to follow. The two soon reached a small yard where a modest wooden house stood among towering trees and scattered plants. The man stated that Lin would stay here for the time being. However, Lin questioned what about his killing intent. The man pulled out an object and told Lin to channel his killing intent into it. As for controlling it, he made it clear that he wouldn't teach him. That was something Lin would have to figure out on his own. Lin used his detection spell on the item. It was a domain godstone, with a simple description reading it could create a domain. However, domain techniques were far beyond Lin's current level. His new teacher told him not to worry about what a domain was for now. His only task was to learn how to control his killing intent. With that, the man walked into the house, leaving Lin alone in the courtyard. Lin sighed, holding the domain godstone tightly. He looked around the small house and the surrounding courtyard. The killing aura here was so dense, it had become almost fog-like, but his new teacher seemed to control it with ease. So there had to be a way. He just hadn't figured it out yet. Finally, he sat cross-legged on the ground. Since his spiritual power was strong, he decided to experiment with it first. Yan watched from a distance, immediately understanding what Lin was attempting. He nodded approvingly, saying, "Smart choice," already excited to see if he can pull it off. Days passed, but Lin never stopped trying. His new teacher, though keeping his distance, observed his efforts closely. The kid's determination was impressive. No wonder Old White chose him, he thought. 10 days slipped by. And then it happened. The thick aura of killing intent around Lin began to shift. Slowly, he started guiding it into the domain godstone. His eyes opened, sharp and focused, and he steadily poured more and more of his killing aura into the stone. Suddenly, a notification appeared in his mind. A new skill unlocked called Slaughter Domain. But the message also said his current level was too low to use it. Yan witnessed it all, and for a moment, he was more than just surprised. He hadn't expected this kid to actually pull it off, at least not so quickly. Back when he learned to control his own killing intent, it had taken him a full 3 months. But this kid? Barely 10 days. Just how strong is his spiritual power? Lin, noticing his teacher nearby, immediately stood and bowed respectfully. But Yan simply tells him there's no need for formality around him. He was more interested in the result, asking if he had gained a domain skill. Lin explained that he unlocked Slaughter Domain, but he couldn't use it yet due to his level. Yan wasn't surprised, saying Lin was far too low level to handle something like that. For now, his only task was to keep channeling every bit of his killing intent into the domain godstone. Once it was full, then he'd be able to use it. With a casual wave, Yan told Lin to get back to it and walked off. What Lin didn't know was that his teacher wasn't leaving to slack off. Seeing the kid's determination, Yan figured it was time for him to do something too. As the scene shifts, White Divine has been waiting impatiently for news these past few days. Today he couldn't help but ask Meng Anwen if he thought the kid would succeed. Meng Anwen smiled and said, "That kid, of all people, would be just fine. Besides, with old Yan personally training him, what was there to worry about?" But White Divine just snorted, clearly annoyed, then said, "All I see is that old bastard getting a good disciple for free." Meng Anwen chuckled, but pointed out that the most important thing now was preparing Lin for his second-class transfer. White Divine assured him that everything was ready, and all they needed to do was wait for Lin to come back. 10 days passed quickly. During this time, Lin focused on his training, and the killing intent swirling within it became even denser. Yet something had changed. Now, even when he stood in the middle of all that murderous energy, it no longer consumed him. Instead, he controlled it completely. Just then, his teacher returned. Lin immediately noticed the heavy scent of blood surrounding him, far more intense than anything he had ever experienced. The teacher was holding something, and in the next second he tossed a blood-soaked bag to Lin, instructing him to eat it raw. Lin caught the bag, his eyes falling on the fresh blood seeping through the fabric. Without hesitation, he opened it and began to eat. Seeing Lin consume the raw beast meat without a second thought, Yan showed a satisfied smile. He then asked if Lin was curious about what kind of meat it was, but Lin simply replied that anything from his teacher needed no questions. Looking closely, Lin noticed that his teacher's clothes were torn, and his arm bore a fresh wound, but Yan just brushed it off as nothing. He explained a brief history of this place and a divine-level creature that resides 10,000 kilometers away called bloodthirsty python, and since they are pretty strong, taking its flesh came at a cost. Apparently, he had fought those beasts for years and was long used to all this. Lin felt a surge of emotion. His new teacher had faced a divine creature and returned wounded, all for his sake. Shortly after, he finished the last piece of the raw beast meat. Then he heard his teacher telling him to get ready to enjoy it. Lin was slightly confused, wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. However, in the next moment, agony struck. A searing pain tore through his body as if thousands of needles were piercing him from within. Blood seeped from every pore of his body. His teacher mentioned the miracle elixir that Lin probably got from the professional competition, capable of boosting all attributes by 200 points. However, that very elixir was only a diluted form of the bloodthirsty python's essence, far weaker than the raw flesh. True power required consuming the beast directly, but then there's the agonizing ordeal, one that separated the strong from the weak, and he believed enduring pain was the price of greatness. He reasoned with Lin's second-class transfer approaching. There was no better time to push his attributes to their limit. The searing pain blurred Lin's senses. His face twisted in agony, his body trembling uncontrollably as he fought to stay conscious. His fists clenched tight, nails digging into his palms. Meanwhile, the system window popped up informing him his attributes were skyrocketing. Yan, watching closely, felt confident that White Divine had already prepared everything for Lin's second-class transfer and professional evolution, saying when it came to such matters, White Divine was always reliable. He then asked Lin if he had gained divinity. Lin, now drenched in blood, struggled to respond, struggling to say 39. Yan became a bit disappointed. It seemed that Lin had only reached the 3rd level of divinity, although it's only a 1% difference per level, considering how critical every percentage point became at higher levels. But then, Lin, through gritted teeth and corrected, said his divinity wasn't 3 but 39. Hearing this, Yan's weapon slipped from his hand and hit the ground. Even his voice became shaky as he asked how is that possible. Lin explained he had reached the end of the divinity secret realm. The revelation left Yan momentarily speechless. His mind spun. So that's it. He couldn't help but curse under his breath. That damn old White. He really knows how to hide a monster. The next day, our boy was now as fresh as ever. But now, knowing about Lin's divinity, perhaps their plans had to change. Then, he asked Lin a question. Are you afraid of death? Lin froze. For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. Then he admitted, saying he wasn't sure. Yan seemed satisfied with that answer. Fear of death wasn't a weakness. It was honesty. No one truly faced death without fear. But then he added another question. What if, standing at the gates of becoming a supreme divine-level professional, there was a 50% chance of death? Would you still go for it? Lin's heart pounded. Supreme divine level, but he had never even heard of such a level before.